So then he says, yes, snow in July.
I feel like Tracy's getting made fun of on this show nowadays.
Oh, come on.
Tracy, just do the thing. Just do the thing.
I'll just do the thing.
If you want
Don't
the
even
thing.
worry about it.
All you got to do.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good day. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, which is, Adam. I got you, mate.
The best show anytime. It's the
longest running business talk show on LinkedIn
Live.
You're so close. Weekly business talk show, but we'll get you there, guys. We'll get you there. Today, we're talking about the business case for pay equity. On Monday, that's this past Monday, September 18th, the United Nations recognized its annual International Equal Pay Day. This, according to their website, represents the long-standing efforts towards the achievement of equal pay for work of equal value. It further builds on the United Nations commitment to human rights and against all forms of discrimination, including discrimination against women and girls. More than simply the right thing to do, pay equity makes business sense too. We'll have a special guest, compensation expert Dan Kopp, to help guide us. We'll talk about compensation transparency, why it's important, and where do we start. But before we do that, let's go around the horn with some introductions. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
I'd love to. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I thoroughly look forward to my Fridays because of this show.
Awesome. Thank you. Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. Tracy Borison from TLB Coaching and Events, a proud partner of DLA Ignite, where we help people take their real, authentic, good juiciness and turn it into sales and marketing and community stuff.
Wow.
And
I'm in.
Do it. Good, juicy stuff. And I wake up early every Friday because of this show.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
You're a stalwart, Tracy. You are a stalwart.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Alex.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name's Alex Abbott, founder of Sapiro. We do all the juicy stuff as well. We help salespeople, we empower salespeople to generate a steady flow of conversation on social media.
Excellent. Thank you. And Tim.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. And I'm famous for the fact that I wrote the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Change Makers.
Fantastic.
I'm also a proud DLA. Sorry.
He's very famous, and we're very lucky to have him on the show.
And Tracy, when I was over in Canada during the summer, I didn't get up at this time and do the digital download.
We know.
You get a gold star.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim, what was that book again?
Mark Twain.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you. And myself,
Andrew will tell you what it is in a moment. He'll put a comment. Andrew will tell you what it is.
Yeah. I am Rob Durant. I am founder of Flywheel Results, also a proud DLA Ignite partner, and we help startups scale. So, as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Dan Kopp, compensation expert, founder and CEO, leadership coach, and mentor. Dan helps clients refine the art of aligning compensation with employee input. Dan, let's bring you on.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Hi, Dan.
How's everybody doing?
Please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got here.
Well, you did a pretty good job. I've been in a leadership position for 30 plus years in various parts of the employment areas. And most recently, since 2019, I've been a co-founder and CEO of Dynamico. And we basically have software that allows our clients to create easily managed compensation systems that ensure equity. And that is huge.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for that. So, Dan, let's start off with a basic question then. How does compensation transparency help employers?
Well, there's a number of ways it helps it. First of all, it makes for a better working environment, for crying out loud. If you've got a select group of people making more by default based on their gender or their skin color, they're making more money than others, you've got dissension amongst your employees right there from the get-go. So when you've got equity, that dissipates. It goes away because everybody's got an even playing field. So it's huge. It'll allow you to attract a more diverse workforce. It'll allow you to keep the great people, not just the people you've been paying higher than everybody else. And you will be a better organization, company, etc. because of it.
So you're
But
not
how would they
saying
know? I mean, speaking about compensation is taboo in many workplaces.
It is. We encourage our partner clients to basically wear their emotions on their sleeve and say, here's our compensation system. So when they're built, they built it through the lens of what makes a great employee in this category. These are the criteria. These are the degrees, the certifications, the abilities, etc. These are the things we want them to do. And these are our exemplar employees display these things. You then go to market and say, hey, if you can do these things, if you possess these skills, you have these degrees, please come to us because you fit us. And then guess what? Once you're here, we're going to pay you for those things. So we've got a nonprofit client who their executive director meets with every single one of their employees when they're initially screened and then hired. And he said, here's where you are. This is what you do. They all know because of their compensation system, how well articulated they are. They all know where they fit in the bigger picture and they know the direction of the organization. There's no guesswork. They see that they're a piece of the bigger puzzle and they're all going in the same direction now. They had employees opt out once they created these systems because they said, that's not me. I just want to be here another year and get more money. I don't want to have to do those things or get those certifications. So those people went elsewhere. They brought in hard chargers that aligned with their systems and they took their organization to another level. That's the success. Pay transparency should be prevalent. It's only not because of what we're talking about, the equity gaps. Don't tell her what I'm paying you because she's going to be upset. Here it is. Everybody should be able to get to the top.
But you're talking about, so you're not talking about salaries being the same in those levels, are you? Or is it just the equity component of the remuneration?
Ideally, our clients make compensation systems. I'm just going to use easy numbers. Let's assume a starting wage is $50,000 and they want to cap it at $100,000. And in a traditional system, you're here 20 years, you're going to get to the $100,000. And it doesn't matter if you outperform the person next to you or not. And let's be real, as long as you're not in the bottom 5% of performers, you're off the first level supervisor's radar because they don't have the bandwidth to do more than the lowest 5%. So as long as you're not in the lowest 5%, you could just coast for 20 years. All of a sudden you're at $100,000 and it doesn't matter if you're good or even average. So we challenge our people and say, hey, what makes a good employee? Is it the degrees, is it the skills, is it the soft skills, the communication ability, all the different things that go into making good employees? Let's articulate those things and assign them value in our compensation system. And don't get me wrong, longevity is important. You don't want people leaving. You want loyalty. So that instead of the only component to get you from 50,000 to 100,000, that's a small minor piece. What have you done for me lately? And you might have 3 to 10 year veterans outperforming the 25, 30 year veterans because they're coming in doing the things you want them to do. Whereas you may have someone at $100,000 who, in lack of a better term, is coasting because they're at the top of the salary schedule, wage or salary, and there's no impetus to be even satisfactory with their job because I'm going to be here another year. I'm going to get a raise just like everybody else. So we challenge the narrative. The paradigm shift is huge. I'll have people ask me, how do we implement this? I said, once you've had the paradigm shift, that's 80% of the work. It's the other 20% that comes pretty easy because you engage the stakeholders, you engage the people in those jobs, the first line supervisors, C-suite executives. What makes a good employee in this category? Let's quantify those things, put them in a compensation system, and reward people who deliver on those things.
And when you say the paradigm shift, is that the mindset changing?
Yeah.
And everyone's on board.
Yeah, because most employers who are now employing people, they grew up in a system that you're here another year, you get a raise. You're here another year, you get a raise, and that's it. So they perpetuate that system, and we have to change. Like, oh, so you want me to actually do things to earn the raise that you're giving me? Yeah, that's what we want people to do. If you're creating widgets, and the average widget maker does 100 per hour, you've got people doing 112 per hour. Well, they should be rewarded because they're making more widgets than the next person. And if you've got somebody who's making 88 per hour, that person probably shouldn't get the same raise as the people who are at least average or the ones who are above average. So at the end of the year, you say, here's our metrics, who measured up, check the boxes, there's the salary or wage.
Dan, you mentioned, oh, go ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to say, Dad, I mean, like, this sounds pretty simple in like concept. So what do you find are the biggest struggles in businesses shifting to this kind of mindset?
We've always done it this way. Everybody's comfortable with the longevity-based system. It's what I grew up on. It's what they're used to. So everybody wants process improvement as long as we don't change anything, right? So it's the change, but they're afraid about, let's be real. You've got a 20-year veteran who's coasting. They're at the top of your salary schedule. Now you've introduced metrics that say all of a sudden you've got to perform to be at the top. Well, a 20-year veteran who may have clout, it may be a union shop and they may have some union pull. All of a sudden they're like, well, we don't want that because I just want to coast like my brethren before me coasted, right? So we suggest to our clients we have a hold harmless in there. So we've got people who are worth less compensation when we change, or they're worth less compensation from one year to the next. How do you want to treat them versus how do you want to treat the people who are actually doing the things you want or having the skills that you want? So maybe those people get a 1% raise or a 2% raise or 3% raise, but the people who are delivering, they're getting a 7% raise or a 5%, whatever number that you choose on an annual basis. And that's how we bring the coasters along, begrudgingly maybe, but it encourages everybody else to perform. And if they're okay getting a 2% raise when everybody else has the ability to get up to 4 or 5 because they're delivering and they're okay with that, okay, win-win. Or they start performing and doing the things that everybody else is doing. That's a win-win because all of a sudden they're performing again. They're doing the things you want them to do.
And I'm wondering though if this is like also challenges people's ego, because at some point you have to admit that you don't actually have a performance-driven organization, right?
Exactly. And I was actually in the room once when I was working with a client and they did a great job. They had nurses and they developed a nursing model and they used first line supervisors and executive and leaders in the nursing group to develop this very comprehensive model, one of the best I've ever seen. When we were done, the board approved it. It was a nonprofit. The board approved it. And the lead nurse who had been involved the entire time, and I'd known him for a couple of years and a great dude, great organ. I mean, he was the face. He's like, oh, I need to leave because great job doing this, but I just realized I don't fit what this organization values. So I'm going to go over here where I do fit. You guys use what you just created and bring people in. So it helps employers find fit, and more importantly, it helps employees find a fit with their employer. And that's what the younger generations want right now. They want to find a fit. They want to make a difference. They are simply asking for that difference to be acknowledged. They don't want no one, and if we're being honest, the baby boomers, Gen Xers, no one wants to be in a system that you just merely have to perform and be there 30 years and you're at the top. If you're great, you're a 4-year veteran, you should be getting paid money that is considered great. And the way our system ensures equity, and it's only as good as the people that are actually using it, right? If you've got a tool that you're using inappropriately, the equity goes out to people. But here's a black and white objective tool. It doesn't matter the gender, ethnicity, race. You check the box. Did employee A meet this criteria? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no? There's the salary for next year. Plain and simple. So it's 100% defensible in court, assuming, of course, you adhere to it when you are doing hiring and also when you are allocating raises on an annual basis.
So, Dan, you alluded to a nonprofit you were working with earlier having people leave, and then you just mentioned the example of the nurse who said this isn't for me, and they left.
Right.
Turnover is expensive. At least that's what we're always taught. So companies look to avoid turnover. Do you have any potential clients that say, well, we don't want that? Do you have anyone balk at pay equity for those reasons?
Absolutely. And what we focus on is the tool actually helps retention rates dramatically, because I guarantee you, employers who are listening are constantly losing great employees because they're underpaying them. Because it's a 5-year veteran who's outperforming others, but because they're on a longevity-based system, they're getting this amount of pay, where the 15, 20, 30-year veteran's getting this amount of pay. Well, this 5-year veteran's leaving because their greatness is not being acknowledged. So they're already subject to turnover. So our system actually attracts candidates who fit and retains great people, as defined, greatness as defined by the employer.
So if I heard you correctly, I heard you just say you're going to have turnover anyway. Why don't you turn over the ones that you'd like to have leave?
Correct. Yes. It's, what is that? Addition by subtraction, right?
Right. Okay. The other thing you mentioned was it helps if you follow it in a court of law. So that leads me to another question I had prepared for today. What are some benefits of having objective, comprehensive compensation systems? I think you've alluded to a couple of them so far.
The main 4 that we talk about all the time is attracting great talent that fits you. And it's going to look different for every organization. We've got school districts that are our clients. And school districts on the surface are all the same, right? They're there to educate kids and make good citizens, etc. But under the surface, there's different values there. So even if you've got neighboring school districts, one district may value one thing and another one is slightly different. So they could use the same tool, but their systems are going to look differently. So when you go to market, say, hey, here's what we value, and then you go to market in the other school district, this is what we value. You've got a conscious choice in front of you when you're looking for jobs, like this one fits me, this one doesn't. And I work with employees and employers all the time talking about fit, because fit is huge. When there's a fit, the employee is happier, the employer gets more, sees the potential and has that employee work to potential. It's a win-win when there's a fit. So you find candidates who fit. We just offhandedly talked a moment ago about retaining great people. Whatever your definition of greatness is, your compensation system identifies it. And our system's fluid, it's dynamic, ergo the name of our company, Dynamico, because when you create a system and implement it, it is perfect until you start using it. Just like any policy, procedure, handbook you've ever used. And then you see the loopholes. You see what you forgot. You put in something that didn't make sense. So we encourage our clients annually to evaluate what's working, what's not working, what's shifted in the market that we now need to change in our compensation systems so we attract different people, etc. So attract people who fit, retain great people, encourage and reward satisfactory and exceptional performance. So at times we run into clients who just have if you have an exceptional rating on your evaluation, we're going to give you this arbitrary bump in $750 extra, whatever, just some random number. Well, we build it right into our systems, and then people see, all right, if I'm at least satisfactory, I'm getting to get this money associated with that. And if I'm actually exceptional, I'm going to get this money associated with that. It takes the ambiguity out of it. There's no favorites behind the scene. And that gets back to the equity piece. It is black and white, and everybody right there sees who's getting what. And we actually have reports in our system that at the end of the year, you can do a summative evaluation with your employee and say, hey, here's your salary for next year based on all these boxes that are checked. More importantly, look at the boxes we didn't check. For example, we'll have clients who say, yeah, I've got people who just aren't nice, and they're not nice to our customers. Well, you're not going to put in a system not nice, right? Nice or not. It's like we're in 5th grade passing notes or something. So from what I can remember, that was a year or two ago. I was in 5th grade. Anyway, but all those intangible qualitative things are typically embedded in an evaluation tool. So if you pull out evaluation tool component number 1 and put in there satisfactory, component number 1 exceptional, and then do that with all 4 or 5 components, all those qualitative things that you want, the soft skills that are sort of hard to measure, they'll come out in a proper evaluation tool. Those then show up in the compensation system. So attract talent that fits, keep great people, ensure equity, and encourage and reward satisfactory and exceptional performance.
I get all of that, and that makes perfect sense. And the softer stuff, the qualitative analysis of people, part of that can easily be addressed by getting people to talk about whether they like working with you. So Alex, he's gone now. Clearly, he doesn't like. Oh, he's back. He doesn't. So you ask, who do you like working with? Who do you not like working with? And I don't like working with person X, and they get enough of those from other people in the organisation, and it tells you that there's some mismatch there. I get that. My experience of being in the workplace is, though, that good people are rare. Yes, you would hope that if you trained somebody, they would be competent and they would be able to do the job. But part of the value that they add to an organization is that, can you do the job? Part of it is, are you always looking to do the job better and deliver more, or are you looking to do the bare minimum? And sometimes people are not worth what you're already paying them. So it's all very well to say, Tim's going to get a 6% pay rise, you're going to get a 1% pay rise because you're not performing. Actually, I'd like to give you a 20% pay cut because you're not delivering value to the organization. So how do we address some of these things? And again, you see people that become institutionalized within organizations. So you talk about, Dave has worked here for 10 years or 20 years. The problem with Dave working in the same organization for 20 years is surely that, we just don't do it that way, is the answer to any change that comes along. I've been here for far longer than you have, Dan, and believe me, we've always done it this way. And look, it's got us to this situation. And actually, that's catastrophically bad thinking, but thinking that you bake into or run the risk of baking into an organization if you're not saying to people, it's perfectly natural to have a life cycle of employees. You join, you get trained, you get onboarded, you become productive, and then you move on.
Yes, I agree. One of the things you mentioned, the 30% pay cut, when I was talking about the people who are worth less compensation, we actually have basically a hold harmless concept, but that allows you, let me use different numbers. All right. So we're going to everybody's going to get a 5% pay raise this coming year. Here's the new system. But in year 2, we're going to say people who are delivering on what we want get up to 6%, and the people who aren't only get a 2%. Year 3, they get 6%. You actually get a 0%. Year 4, they're still eligible for 6%. You're at 98% of what you're currently at. So in other words, a 2% pay cut. So our system allows for ripping the Band-Aid off. You can go from where you are to where you want to be tomorrow. You can do it over time. And what do you want to do with those people who aren't performing? If you want to put a 20% pay cut in there, the system allows you to do that. Now, obviously, that's not great for culture, because if you're using it as a tool to drive people out, there are other leadership and managerial approaches you could take to do that versus making them uncomfortable because of their paycheck. That's sort of it's accurate that you want to do that, but I would recommend it's over a 3 to 5 year implementation.
You'd end up in tribunal.
You're held
You'd end
harmless
up in
because
court
everybody else. But just so you know, 5 years from now, you will have had 5 years warning. If you're not measuring up, you're actually going to get up to a 5 or 10% pay cut, and that's on you. And they're going to do one of three things. They're going to be okay with that. I doubt it. They're going to start playing the game and delivering on the things you want, even though their heart may or may not be into it. Okay, you still win as the employer because they're delivering the great things you want. Or they're going to say, this isn't me. I'm going to go elsewhere. You go to market and bring people in who fit.
They'd take you in the UK and in Europe. They'd take you to court. You'd end up in tribunal doing that. Dan, got some points from Rob. There's a couple of questions. A couple of points. So, gross pay is becoming less relevant. It's disposable income. This can vary dramatically by country, rent, mortgage costs, etc. Are you talking about global pay equity? Question.
I'm talking compensation through the lens of any employer for any employee group. So it could be literally used by every employer, and it could be compensation equity for everybody globally. But what we've seen is a lot of businesses, public, private, nonprofit, a lot of people get in trouble when somebody mentioned the taboo. It's taboo to talk about compensation. So they get into trouble when people do start talking about it, and it's exposed that there's discrimination and inequity. So this levels the playing field for all employees. It's the right thing to do. It levels the playing field, and it keeps them out of hot water. Even on the hiring portion of things, you've probably experienced, well, I'm bringing this candidate in who happens to be male because of the experiences he's had elsewhere. That's why he rose above other employee or other candidates. Well, our system allows for like one-offs. Mr. Smith came in with this experience, which made him be hired. And because of that experience, we're going to give him $5,000 extra over a normal employee another employee who happened to be female. But our system shows why that is. And the courts will look at, all right, there's a disparity 15, 20 years from now. Let's assume there's turnover in the HR office, turnover in all the C-suite executives. No one knows 20 years later why Mr. Smith is $5,000 ahead of Ms. Jones. The system will reflect upon hiring, he was giving this money for this reason. There's the evidence right there. So it ensures equity. It is basically your evidence when if you ever got in hot water, it's going to stop discrimination. Assuming, of course, the people who are enacting and in charge of it are actually following it as it is presented. Because again, your system's only as good as the ethics of those who are implementing it.
Another comment from Rob. Thanks, Dan. Another comment from Rob is controversial potential question. It took diversity to extreme. How can you have equity? They all offer different skills and outcomes.
We look on we build our systems on a macro level. So let's talk about custodians. Most people can relate to what a custodian does. Let's articulate what we want our custodians to do. So we've got a system built on a macro level. Here's what an ideal custodian looks like. What bad choice of words. At the end of the day, the performance looks like this skill, this ability, this customer service, this on call or not. We were talking about snow earlier. Maybe some of your custodians are on call during the winter months, like January through December up in Canada, the winter months. And they come in and you pay them when they come in at 4 in the morning to make sure your sidewalks are cleared. But the days they check at 3 in the morning, whether or not they come in and it's not snowing, you don't pay them. But you sure value that. So you would have some type of a metric in there, like they're on call, and it might be 47 cents an hour, but extrapolate that over 2,080 hours for the work year, then all of a sudden that's real money that you acknowledge them. So it's built on a macro, but each individual employee is examined on a micro level. So did employee A meet this criteria, have this ability, have this skill set? Did they increase a year in employment? Were they satisfactory on their evaluation? Were they exemplary on their evaluation, etc.? So built on a macro level, each employee is examined on a micro level.
And Rob's final point is he said age is not an outcome.
I agree 100%. So unfortunately, longevity-based systems are usually beneficial to veterans, which veteran equates to older people. So we've got systems that it doesn't matter your status, veteran or relatively new, in essence, your age typically, because if you're performing, you have these skills, these abilities, these soft skills that are embedded in the evaluation tool, we're going to pay you because we've identified if you do those things or have those skills, it's going to make us better. So we're going to pay you for making our organization better. We're going to grow together and it's a win-win. So you want your employees to aspire, all of them to aspire to get to the top of the salary schedule, not because they've been there 20 years. Yay, I've been here 20 years. Look at me. No, you breathed there for 20 years and you weren't the bottom 5% of performers. Whoop-de-doo. But if you're at the top, it says something. Now, it's not something, you don't want to create systems that are easy. These are still going to be challenging, but they've got to be realistically challenging.
So, Dan, you mentioned school systems, and that brought to mind for me unions. In my experience, having been in unions, it's very much about tenure. It's very much about time in title to dictate your next level of income. How do you find this received by organized labor? Do they push hard against it or do they embrace it?
Well, that's a good question, because typically when you're dealing with representatives of a union, you're probably talking about more tenured people who benefit from the system that you're talking about and who are oftentimes, and this is not a union statement, it's just, we talked about it earlier, veteran people who are at the top of a salary schedule, there's no impetus to be even average. You're at the top, I'm going to get the raise like everybody else, I'm going to coast. So when we've got people who benefited from the system on the other side of the table as representatives of the greater group of people, whether it's a union shop or not, all they say is, well, how am I going to lose in my people? No, this is not good. So that's when we talk about the hold harmless. And that's when you hopefully get a chance to engage union members who aren't necessarily at the top and are the 3 or 4 identified negotiators. Because I've been in school districts that are union school districts, and when we have a broad conversation about what makes a good educator, there are a myriad of things. And let me tell you, the people who aren't at the top typically are outperforming the people who are at the top. So they'll come up with like this, all these different things that make them great, and they're right. So if we've got the hold harmless, say, all right, people at the top, you're going to be at a 3% raise. People who are doing the things we want, you're going to be at a 6% raise. That's sort of less, or the scenario I gave you a minute ago, everybody's going to be at 105% of what you're currently at. So 5% raise next year. The following year, those who are delivering also at 5%. Those who are no longer delivering, you're at 4%. Following year, 5%, 3%, 5%, 2%. And that's those teachers who are educators who are at 20-year veterans. They know what good teaching is. I'm sure they were great when they were 3 to 15-year veterans, but it's easy to coast. And this goes across every employment category in every sector of the society. It's easier to coast the more veteran you get. You lose the gumption to be at the top of your game. There's no impetus to. You see somebody working beside you and you think, well, they're letting this dude work here and he's not getting fired. I just got to outperform him. I'm good. So all those thoughts go into people coasting, and a system that encourages and rewards satisfactory, maybe just do satisfactory. Could you imagine an organization that has satisfactory employees across the board in every category? Oh my gosh. Now, I'm sure that I had that conversation on a podcast about a month ago, and the person said, well, I'm in an organization. I said, yeah, there's two of us, and we're both pretty good. I said, well, all right. So there's two of you, a sample size of two. Odds are you can get above average for the sector, above average people if you got a sample size of two. But if you got an organization of 50, I'm sure you've got people who are industry standard below average and some who are above. Can you imagine everybody being at least average? That would be a remarkable organization in which to work.
I was a bit concerned earlier on about Adam's comment about he's worked at some organisations where the people are rubbish. Because in our organisation, it's only him and me.
That was a long time ago, Tim. Before I so Yayan's got a really interesting comment here about the $5,000 extra that somebody's getting paid. You know, the compounding interest of that over a long period of time means that the difference between you and me becomes enormous. Even if you are getting a higher pay raise than I am, you know, it still maintains a huge differential between your salary and mine. And I think that part of the challenge here is in trying to be fair, you end up if you're not careful, you end up not rewarding outperformance. You end up rewarding mediocrity, because the concept of giving you, if you're not working hard and you're not delivering and you're not doing all of those kind of the things that I would expect an exemplar of employee to do, and I'm still giving you a 2% pay rise, I'm rewarding you for not doing what I expect of you, aren't I?
Absolutely. And that's why the decision makers of an organization have the ability to set what that, you offhandedly mentioned 2% because I use that example, but maybe you leave it at 0%. Maybe in year one, you put it at 9. Year one would be challenging because people who are not delivering right now are playing the game in the rules that the organization has set up, right? They're getting paid. They're at the top of the salary schedule. I played the game. I was here 20 years. I'm there. That's the game I played. I won. Now to change the rules and say, oh, you're worth less money, we're actually going to give you a 3% pay cut, I would be hesitant to do that as an employer because of that's not fair to the employee, because this is employee centered as well. So I would say in year one, we're going to give you 2%, but everybody else is getting 5, you're going to get 2, or everybody's getting 5, period. But the rules have changed. A year from now, when we look at raises, you'll have had a year to just demonstrate to us that you're worthy of that 5%. So in year 2, everybody's going to get a 5, except those who are not. If you're not performing, you're at 1%, or you're not performing, you're at 0%. So it depends on how the organization wants to do it. I had a director of an organization here in Wisconsin say, well, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. Okay, good luck. I wouldn't do it in year one because you're talking about ripping the Band-Aid off of people who played the game in the rules you had in place for 40 years. That's not their fault. So you tiptoe into it, but maybe year 2, you just rip the Band-Aid off. They've had a year. I warned you a year ago, this is what I put you on notice. This is how we're going to start compensation. You've known for a year, you're still underperforming. You didn't finish that certification that we need in this position. Somebody mentioned antiquated skills. Think of the IT industry and the different certifications and skills that are prevalent now compared to 10, 20, 5 years ago, for crying out loud. So if somebody's sitting on their laurels in the IT world and they're still thinking their certifications and skills and their learning they did 7, 10 years ago are going to get them by in today's IT world, that's somebody you probably don't want working in your IT shop. So you go to Microsoft and say, hey, these are the skills we want. Come to us, we're going to pay you for them. Or that 7-year veteran says, oh my gosh, I've got a year to make sure I have this certification. I better hone up on this because next year I'm going to start getting paid for those things. If I don't do these things and get with the program, I'm going to be paid, freeze my pay, or the following year is going to be at 98% or 95%, whatever the case may be. So that would be an ideal situation. You take at least a year to implement. While you tiptoe in the waters of introducing things that are more important than simple longevity, but in year 2, we're going to make it, this is it, people. You've had warning.
So do employers still give like year-on-year standard pay rises and reward people for? Because
I was going to say, because I did not get annual pay raises when I was in college.
Tim and Alex and I worked at a company together, and it was well known that you didn't get pay rises. If you wanted more money, you had to deliver more value to the business.
Until you handed your notice in.
Yeah, or you left and came back again, or you got a significant promotion. But, just for doing your job, we've hired you at pay rate X to do this job. You're doing it. Great. You got the same job next year. If you want to earn more money, well, you need to sell more stuff. And that to me sounds, it drives people not to coast. It drives people to be absolutely focused on what their KPIs are, doesn't it?
It does. And your initial question, are people still doing that? Yes, there are still blanket raises both in private and public sectors where they say, all right, let's look at CPI and we're going to give everybody a 4.7% increase this year across the board, done. And they walk away. That does not do anything except put more money in people's pockets, even the people who are underperforming. In your suggestion earlier, getting back to our topic, which was equity, let's assume you are in a situation where you get $100,000, we paid you to do it, you did it, but several somebody's excelled, and we're going to give them more money. Getting back to the pay equity and pay transparency issue, so how much money did everybody actually get? Because was it just the white males who got $5,000 extra, and everybody who's not white male got $1,500? And where'd those numbers come from? Where'd that $5,000 come from? In like the number itself, not literally the dollars, but who came up with $5,000? Our system allows for people to basically put value. What's more important, this or this? Well, this one is. All right, the system's going to show you this is more important, and it's always going to be until you change it. Because you've changed, the market's changed, something inside your organization's changed. You just have you've got calculated, targeted money going to things that you find valuable, as opposed to, oh, you're worth $3,000 raise, and here's your $17,000 raise, and here's your $7,000 raise. Those are just arbitrary numbers, and there's no consistency, and that's when you've done things that are not pay equity focused and not right for human beings and could get you in trouble.
I have a question about beginning pay equity, because I feel like this is a problem is that a starting salary, most businesses will give you a range, right? And so then you may or may not accept that, where you fall in that range when you start. And so because I feel like this is a culture thing, right? And it is to some degree do we want as a business to have performance? And if we do want a business, what is performance? We've talked a lot about value. What is value, right? So what is the process of actually going from, hey, I hire people based on job descriptions and I have this way, which may be conscious or unconscious right now, that I hire people. How do I start to have that conversation about what is valuable, and what happens when I realize I'm paying people for a lot of stuff that's not valuable?
Great question. So
Great question.
I was asked recently, what's the one problem people have? And the one question you repeatedly get, and it's usually something like you just said, is how do we roll this out to our people? Where do we even start the conversation? So this is what I've done. This is what I recommend our people do. And this is what I've seen work. You get people at your meeting space, whether it's an auditorium, a big conference room, whatever your meeting space is. All right, people, they're your C-suite executives standing up here. Maybe it's just you and you've got 12 people working for whatever. We're going to create compensation systems that address the great things that you do for us. If you're making our organization company better, those are the types of things we want in our compensation systems. And more than 80% of the people are like, oh, yes, finally, right? It's the good old boys who are sitting in the back, who one of them's thinking this, and they're going to, hey, boss man, what about those of us who don't do great things? What are you going to do with us? Well, I then asked the C-suite executives, the decision maker, like, do you really want to continue to have an organization based on the people who are not really of value? Or do you want to do it on the other 80%? And then when those 20% or so realize the hold harmless and the power of the hold harmless, oh, so you mean I'm going to get a 3% raise regardless of what I do or not still, and they could get 6? I'm good. It typically calms them down and they move forward. And then when you actually create the system, you engage the voices, as diverse a collective voice as you can, veteran, not veteran. Age is different than veteran status. So you've got older people, younger people, male, female, ethnicity, race, whatever you can think of that means diversity. Those are the people you talk to say, what makes an ideal employee in this category? Let's do it.
So I've got a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a question for you. So, so it sounds like the ideal scenario. So equal pay across all kinds of diverse ethnic backgrounds,
Correct.
man, woman. Is there evidence that shows that actually by doing it this way, it boosts the profitability of the business? It actually the business grows faster.
Well, I've got another client I'm going to reference, and they're our longest tenured client and the one that has had the most impact because they're 4 years into the system now. They had, when they started, they had in the business, they had $5 million equity. 2.5 years later, they had built that to $19 million, and they had their president CEO attributes 100% of their growth and success to using our system because he had people leave who didn't fit. His system caused some people so they personally opted out. I'm going to make a decision. I'm out as an employee. Others, they saw the light and like, oh, I don't like where this is going. I'm out. I'm going to go over here where I can coast. And they brought in people, and everybody's aligned, going in the same direction. So there is evidence that shows that it's working. And I do want to, if your question is done, I want to go back to Tracy's questions because there was something that came up. You made the comment about the hiring. What do you do at hiring? I've got my system. What now? I talk to employers about this all the time. The system dictates where you bring somebody in. There's no ambiguity because even when, as an HR director, well, I've got my system. All right. At the end of the day, and I've seen this happen. It's played out in a court of law where, I'm new as the HR person and the president's new. We don't know why there's disparity from these two people who were hired 15 years ago because whoever's in that chair, our hiring range is $50,000 to $60,000 starting. Great. Did they bring in all the females at 50 and all the males at 60? The system should dictate that. I was in a discussion with a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion expert on LinkedIn about a year ago, and his post was sort of bravado, like, "Oh, don't you love it when you ask a candidate how much they're worth, and she says this, and you say, oh no, you're worth this." I'm like, dude, you should never ask a candidate what they want, because if you are talking about a member of a marginalized community, female, ethnicity, race, whatever, you're assuming they've never been discriminated against in the past, compensation-wise, so they're undervaluing themselves. Your system should dictate how much they want. You, as the employer, you need to lead on that. You don't, he negotiated, but I've got a colleague who's in court right now, and he's defending, based on the notes from 15 years ago, it appeared this guy negotiated the starting salary better than this woman did. That's why there's disparity. Like, oh my God. No, the system is black and white. Where do the people fit? It doesn't matter what their background is, their ethnicity, race, etc. The system dictates it. Do not put candidates in a position of saying, I'm worth this. No, you tell them what they're worth, period. Done.
So in that scenario, though, because I think I don't know, maybe we wouldn't all agree. In my opinion, there's systemic problems that prevent specific types of groups of people getting education. For women in particular, there's a lot of people who have career gaps because they stay home to take care of their kids. And so how does the system prevent like that kind of discrimination? Because I feel like that's like again, a cultural thing. If I'm going to say like, actually, I don't want to hire moms, so I'm going to not show value in the system for people who have career gaps or show it as negative value. How does that come into play?
Your system is based on greatness in your current employees and what you hope to have them reach.
So we have like take away like the years of experience. We take away if you have career gaps, we take away your education, because I feel like education still plays a big role in a lot of hiring.
It does, but at the end of the day, how important is it?
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah, right. That was a rhetorical question. Sorry. How important is it? Because I'm going to go back. Here's an example. I was just talking to somebody the other night. His daughter's going to nursing school, and she wants to go out and get a 2-year degree versus a 4-year degree. And I said, I actually have a client that has nurses, and we talked about the value of a 4-year degree nurse, and they told me a month or 6 weeks in, we can't tell the difference between them because they come in raw. We train them to do what we want them to do, and we can't tell the difference. So that shows you in that small example that the degree, technically, you obviously have to have a nurse degree, but a 2-year versus a 4 versus a master's, PhD, whatever, you've got to be trained. So I would be hard pressed to find a system that addresses some type of employment gap and how that would be legally justifiable, because we actually partner with a law firm, and the president of the firm and I get on stage, and and the vice president, and typically the vice president, she starts on stage and says, I'm going to scare you about all the trouble you can get into with compensation systems and what you can do wrong. I'm going to do such a good job of it, you're going to hire Dan to keep you out of trouble, because it's an objective tool that should not address things like what's your experience. Now, if someone comes in, it's a 30-year-old and it's a male and a female, and you've got somebody, a 30-year-old, and you experience elsewhere, you've been in that sector doing that's the experience that person has. It's not about it's not about the employment gap a female may have had because of raising child for 5 years before he or she went to school, whatever. So that could come into play, but it levels the playing field. What does this candidate have to offer me, and how are they going to make us great compared to what this candidate has? Name, gender, ethnicity, none of that's even involved here. Here's the 2 candidates. Which one do we want? Or we want both. Mr. Smith actually has the experience, so he's going to get a $2,000 pay bump at the beginning because he's got the requisite experience to put him ahead of his contemporaries who are new. And the system 20 years from now will still recognize why that $2,000 pay gap is there.
Dan, you mentioned earlier a company that had been doing things their way for 40 years and now wants to come in and overnight change it. And while you don't advocate for that, you do talk about, after 1 year it's this, after 2 years it's this. And in that period, how much is the organization evaluating and possibly changing the criteria to make these evaluations? And is that changing the rules for the employees year over year?
It first of all, they could do it as often they want. What we encourage our clients to do is say, all right, you're building up to the fiscal year, you develop your program, your systems between now and December 31st. At some point in time, you lock them in place. Say it's December 1st. All right, people, December 1st, here it is. You've helped us build them. We're ready. Here's what it looks like. January 1st, they go into operation. And then that system is locked, period. You use it for the entire fiscal year. But I mentioned earlier, your system that you implemented January 1st is perfect until about January 2nd when you realize, oh, we forgot, whatever. So we encourage our people, and most of our clients, we call them paid differential variables or PDVs. Most of them have between 25 and 35 PDVs for any employee group, some of which are 2 years of experience, 3 years of experience, et cetera. So they add up pretty quickly when you have that base of experience, but those might be a pittance in the grand scheme of things, but they're there. So they'll look at those maybe every August, September, 4 or 5 months before the end of the fiscal year, say, all right, what did we miss? What did we overlook? What has changed externally in the market that we now need to value more? What's changed internally? We hired this person with this skill set to operate this machine. Well, that machine's obsolete, so we no longer need to pay him or her for operating that machine. So what changed? And there's minor tweaks. Oh, we forgot this. Let's add in this, which minimizes the value of other things, which goes back to the hold harmless. Maybe the system changes a little bit, and all of a sudden you've got somebody who's worth less money because you changed the rules again. That's where that hold harmless comes in. So what do you want to do with the people who you change the rules a little bit? They're still performing, but they're not perfect, not in perfect alignment. Maybe they're at 104%, so they get 4% raise next year, where everybody else gets a 6%. Or they're at whatever. So you've got that ability to tweak those numbers every year and to tweak what's in there. Schools, for example, a hard to fill position, physics teachers across the country, they're hard to find. So maybe every school district says, we're going to give an extra $10,000 for hard to fill positions as defined at a physics teacher. And now 10 years later, you can't find a biology teacher because all the science-minded people went out and got physics degrees. All right. Well, then you're going to change your system. Say, all right, note to self, be a little bit broader and say just hard to fill, let the board define that on a yearly basis, but get rid of physics and all of a sudden biology's there. But the hold harmless, you don't want to take advantage of your physics teachers because they're there because of that. So that's where that hold harmless comes into play. And it's all in the document to say what changed, why is it changed, and you've got longitudinal data to basically go to court and say, here's how we've based our salary decisions. And it's a legal document, it's evidence, and it's going to anybody with an 85-cent pen. I've been an attorney. Anybody with an 85-cent pen can sue you. True. But when you come to discovery and say, here's all my evidence, they're going to say, oh, all right, well, that was a waste of time. So that's the value of a system that is comprehensive and objective. It takes the ambiguity out of it, even at the hiring phase. The system dictates 100% of the time what that person is worth.
Fantastic. I can't speak for anyone else, but for myself, this has been eye-opening, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Dan,
Yeah,
how can people get in touch with you?
You can hit me up on LinkedIn at Dan Kopp Leadership on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly at my company email, dan@dynamicosystems.com, DINAMICO, dynamicosystems.com, and check us out on the web, dynamicosystems.com. Actually, you can create a small limited example on our website for free. Go there, create an account, and you can start playing with it to see what types of controls are out there and see what types of things you could put in there and make your ideas come to life. It's easy. Once you have that paradigm shift, creating the system takes some time because you're not going to sit down in an hour meeting and say, hey, let's change how we've done this for 40 years. What makes a good custodian? Go. And 40 minutes later, you're done. No, it's going to take some time for people to absorb. Hey, we met last week. I forgot to mention this. I forgot this. Let's add this. What I said last week doesn't make sense because this is that. So it takes several meetings over a couple months to get a logical, ideal system set in place. But the timing's great right now. If your fiscal year starts January 1st, just know that by January 2nd or 3rd, you'll realize you forgot something or you made a mistake. But you put that on your working copy and say, note to self, next August, September, as we're looking forward to the beginning of the year. What do we need to tweak, add in, delete, all those types of things. So Dan@dynamicosystems.com or on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Right.
So to our, what's that? Pardon?
No, I just said thank you.
You're finishing.
Oh, yes. So
We're
to
finishing
our
time. I know. Doesn't know how
audience,
to handle it.
to our panelists, thank you very much. Another lively discussion. If you have something to say, if you want to be on the show, we would love to hear from you. digitaldownload.live, click on the Be Our Guests, or you can click on the QR code now on screen. Adam, Tracy, Tim, thank you very much. Dan, of course, thank you very much. It has been a fantastic
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
This has been the
honored to be
Digital
here. I appreciate
Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.